Hey everyone, this is a call. What I want to talk about today is I want to talk about, I guess, I don't want to say it's a misrepresentation, but we'll say an oversimplification when somebody says, oh, hey, if you want to be more creative or you want to be more successful, you have to learn about sexual transmutation. And this idea originally came from a book that was written, I believe, 1937. The name of the book was called Think and Grow Rich. It was Napoleon Hill. And in this book, he spoke about, without going into too much detail about what it was, he spoke about sexual transmutation and how it was necessary in order to become successful, right? So Napoleon Hill wrote a number of books that were like very much about, sort of career success, personal success, financial success kind of books. And so that was his cup of tea and that was his focus. Now, what's interesting is that I tend to think when people think about the terms like, purpose, like, oh, what's my purpose in life? Things like that, they don't necessarily, well, the ego has a particular idea what its purpose is, but the universe may have a very different idea. And so really what it is, it's about coming into alignment with how you're being led. What leads you, what is the language that leads you? Well, that's your intuition, your instincts, things of that nature. It's that I just know, right? You just know to go that direction or to go with that person or whatever it is, or to not go with that person, right? So in general, as you start to honor your inner authority as opposed to an external authority, you generally will start to move closer to what your purpose is, right? So, and it's through contacting or connecting with one's purpose that we start to identify what prosperity means. So prosperity, for instance, that's something else that means something very different to different people. So prosperity for some people means a bunch of money, right? And prosperity for someone else simply means I don't have to worry about money. And for other people, it's like, hey, I have all these family members around me, right? I feel very prosperous, or I have a nice home to live in. Again, it's different things to different people. But when Napoleon Hill was originally talking about sexual transmutation and this idea that if somebody honors choice, right, as it relates to sexual energy, because that's really what it is. We start to choose what to do with that energy as opposed to being on autopilot and releasing it, okay? So, I shouldn't say just releasing it. Oftentimes we become rather enslaved to it. If you think about pornography and fantasy and to what lengths people will go to get sex, et cetera, et cetera. So if we are to start to make choices with that energy, it works basically in two ways. One is the energy well. That's one concept I'm going to talk about. And the other concept is really about distraction, right? So the energy well. If you have more energy, you have a clearer mind, right? So if you have a clearer mind, you have more energy, you know what direction to go, generally speaking. Like you have more money to do creative things. That doesn't mean you become an artist, right? So this word creative also has to be changed in terms of how we interpret it. But creativity could be like, how somebody chooses to earn money. They have many different creative ways to earn money, many different streams of income. But again, this idea of going back to purpose is that purpose has nothing to do with money. Purpose has nothing to do with your career. It can. Don't get me wrong, it can. Career could be purpose to a lot of people. Having family can be purpose to a lot of people. But purpose is different. Purpose is very different. So what I mean by purpose is two things. One is you have point A to point B from birth to death. You've got this idea that from birth to death, we're here to fill time, right? And so how we fill that time is ultimately being led by the universe, by source, by God, by spirit, whatever you want to call it. So your intuition, your instincts, how you're being led, again, if you're honoring your internal authority, how you're being led ultimately guides you to where you need to be. And ultimately where you need to be, you're going to get feelings of fulfilling your purpose, right? Feelings of prosperity. And it's basically the hallmarks of those feelings are joy and love, right? So joy, love, fulfillment, basically the feeling of like, I did a bunch of hard work and my day is done. So it's like an exhaustion, but it's a satisfying exhaustion. It can manifest in a number of different ways. But the reality is that purpose is non-specific. It doesn't look a particular way. So that's the sort of the micro way of looking at purpose. Now, the macro way of looking at purpose is point A to point B. Everything is about vibration, right? So you've got this energy body that's around you where your memories are stored, where you have your traumas and your peak experiences. Everything is stored in this energy body. And this is in a lot of ways how we work out karma. And you could say even like your past life stuff's in your energy body and your DNA and whatever. But the reality is this energy, within the energy body, these patterns, they end up drawing in situations, circumstances that help you work through these patterns if you're present, right? So you have to be present. And this is part of the benefit of practicing meditation, is that you gain presence, objectivity in the ability to witness thoughts, feelings, emotions, whatever it is, as it rises to the surface. And if you can witness it, then it's not your true nature. That's the rule of thumb here. So if something rises, it's objective. And if it's an object, you are not the object. It's like that plant that's behind me. I can see that plant, I can look at that plant, but I'm not the plant, right? Because I'm looking at it and it's a separate object. And you could say, oh, when you reduce everything down to an energetic level, everything is one. Well, that's true. But in sense of the meditation aspect, in the sense of having objectivity, the reality is that in the material plane, it is inherently separate. It feels separate. So, and that is the same of all your past that rises to the surface, your emotions, your feelings, all these things. They're all to be honored, but they're not to be attached to. Like, you cannot attach to those things. Otherwise, if you attach to them, you send energy to them and they continue to repeat over and over again. So, and I call that the stupid loop. Like, I tend to worry a lot. So I'll go on, I worry about dumb stuff, and it just repeats over and over and over and over again until I become conscious of it and I become present with it. And then oftentimes it'll stop and it'll pause. So that's how it functions for me anyway. So, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting. It's like I ran 5 miles when I go on these like worrying binges. It's ridiculous. So anyway, going back to this idea of purpose, I say for every human being, the macro purpose is to elevate your resonance, elevate your frequency. So at the moment of death, your frequency moves towards like frequency. Like is one of the ways you could say that. So the best way I can say it is if you get a bucket of water, you throw some mud in there, you throw some oil in there, you shake it up, you stir it up, and then you let it settle. It'll settle into layers, right? So as it settles into layers, this is very similar to how I perceive, this is what I've perceived in meditation through visions, et cetera, is that the universe ends up dividing in layers based on frequency. And so your frequency at the moment of death determines which of the layers or dimensions, if you want to look at it as dimensions, where your frequency goes. So that could be purpose on sort of a grander, broader level. But now going back to the topic, how does working with sexual energy ultimately improve your creativity and your ability to achieve more prosperity? The energy well is the simplest explanation. Meaning, particularly if you're a guy, you rub them out, right? You're rubbing it out. You're getting rid of that energy. The sexual energy rises. You can't handle it. Oh, God, horny feeling. It's so overwhelming. And we all get addicted to high, because we feel high when we have orgasms. For some men, it's like 20, 45 seconds of this very bliss. But it's a short-term bliss, and it doesn't last. And am I right, guys? Pre-cum, post-cum, you're a different person. So you have to honor that. You have to honor the fact that when you discharge, there is a shift, there is a change in your disposition, how you feel about your body, how you feel about your energy, how you feel about life, how you feel about the person you're lying next to if you're having sex, right? It all shifts in that moment. Sometimes there's that buyer's remorse of like, ooh, what have I just done? Like, that's if you're running around pursuing kinks and things of that nature. You start to realize that perhaps that wasn't the best idea. So the point is that if you are constantly draining your well, it is harder to have a clear mind. It is harder to feel more comfortable in your own body because pleasure pleasurable sensations, the horny feeling, etc., it's a pathway into the body. It's a pathway into feeling and sensing. So when you rub it out, you're essentially giving yourself numbness on some level. The yogis and the tantra people say you disconnect from your root, right? So you disconnect from the root. You disconnect from, again, the sort of pleasure that the body offers. And with that pleasure, you also have sensation and feeling. And so if you are numb to life, you end up essentially start pursuing things to not feel numb, right? So you could say drugs, alcohol, et cetera, et cetera. And that certainly doesn't help with clarity. That certainly doesn't help with achievement, does it? And it certainly won't take you closer to prosperity. So once you kind of figure out, hey, I'm draining myself constantly with discharging the sexual energy all the time, because you have to keep in mind the sexual energy is only the energy that is bound up in the genitalia. It is the same energy that goes towards digestion. It's the same energy that goes towards thought. It's the same energy that goes towards everything that you do. Okay, it is life force energy. It is indistinguishable, and it's only distinguishable, like I said, to the extent that it gets bound up in the genitals, and then it feels sexual, so hence it is sexual energy. But as soon as you transmute it or move it out of the genitals so it is not concentrated there, and God knows there's a ton of different ways to do this, but if it's not concentrated in the genitals, that heat is not concentrated in the genitals, one of the things it does is, it reduces inflammation, which is quite interesting if you think about men and their inflamed prostate issue, but that's a side note, that's something else. But what it also does is it removes the heat from the genitals, it removes that pressure to do something with it. So sexual transmutation practices for those individuals who are interested in furthering their career, having more mental clarity, balancing out their emotional states, right? So if you tend towards a lot of depression or anxiety, things of that nature, not saying that stuff goes away. I'm saying you become more powerful and more centered in the midst of the ups and downs of life, which happen whether you like it or not. So that is incredibly precious. This is something I've experienced many times in my own life path, is that if I can be centered, I have a lot of energy, I have a lot of clarity. It doesn't matter if I'm having the ups and downs in terms of I feel low energy or high energy. If I'm able to be centered in the midst of it, it's less impactful and it doesn't last as long, frankly. And I also know what to do to diffuse some of the patterns over time. So that's one of the ways in which sexual energy can directly lead to greater career success or financial success. It has to do with having simply more energy and more clarity. So on the other level is distraction, right? So distraction. I'm not one of these people who focuses a lot on work or career. I always tell people I didn't come into this lifetime to be a worker bee, because I'm not. But that doesn't mean I'm not passionate about the things I'm passionate about. It doesn't mean I'm not purposeful about my actions in life or what I do from day to day. The reality is I just am not focused on job. Okay, so, but that being said, working a 40-hour week is not the thing for me. So I have some amount of time that I have to do something with. Whether you work 40 hours a week or not, this is not the relevant point. The point I'm getting at is that you have some amount of time that you're not sleeping and not eating. And that amount of time, you have to choose what to do with it. So if sexual energy is operating on autopilot in your life, if it is leading you towards pornography, towards excessive fantasy, towards screwing around on hookup apps, whatever it may be, it's occupying time. It's occupying focus. And it's not just the moment you're looking at something. It's how it interferes with your flow in your day, right? Because I know when I get something stuck in my head sexually, it'll disrupt my sleep. It'll sidetrack my entire day, because all of a sudden it's 2:00 in the afternoon, I'm starting to feel a little bit fuzzy and I want to get stimulated. So, what naturally do I want to do? I want to stimulate the sexual energy, have an orgasm. That could be a tendency, right? This is what I used to do all the time. I would give myself an orgasm in the middle of the day, and then all of a sudden I'd be even more tired, right? I just feel drained. And I'm why did I do that? Because I wanted something to pull me out of the sleepiness of the midday. And anyway, when I learned that pattern, when that pattern finally stopped, I'm able to now go into my sunlight hours from when I wake up till till the evening time, and I'm able to be much more productive with my day because I'm not getting sidetracked by pornography. I'm not getting sidetracked by these little bumps in the road of desire and of getting hooking up and kink and whatever it is that I was focusing on, which could have been a plethora of things. But the reality, I think, this resonates for a lot of you who are watching this. So anyway, when Napoleon Hill mentioned that in Think and Grow Rich, he was also in some ways, I think, relating to something very biblical, actually. And there's a biblical verse which I'm going to leave this video at, and it's from John 3:14. And this biblical verse, I think, is incredibly meaningful. I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but the verse is this: "And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up." Anytime you see the word serpent, what are we talking about? One's earthy or more baser instincts, of which Kundalini, sexual energy, is related. So we have to elevate that sexual energy through choice, through practices, through discipline, through meditation, in order to fulfill our purpose, which is to overall raise our frequency in life. Hey, so with all that said, hopefully you found this video useful. Any of you out there who need help, need guidance in terms of like coaching, in terms of how to deal with your sexual energy, how to break away from, let's say, the influence of pornography or excessive fixation on fantasy, etc., or even how to gain space from an ex relationship, right? You can reach out. I have a coaching program, which is a 6-week program, or I also have individual sessions you can sign up for, and anyway, we can go from there. So you can check out my website, which I have posted down below the video. And with all that said, thank you for watching.